Welcome, everyone. This is Englewood City Council study session on Monday, October 22nd, 2018. And we're in here tonight instead of next door because of the voting going on, and the community room is being used for that and needs to stay secure. So we will do our study session. There are no, the format is the same as a study session, so that's what we'll be following. So first up tonight is, first agenda item is a redevelopment program update. This is direction and informational. And here to present for us tonight is Mr. Premba, right?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, it's nice to be here with you tonight. I am Dan Premba. I'm the Chief Redevelopment Officer for the city, and pleased to be here to give you an overview of the redevelopment action plan that we've been working on in the development department, and look forward to your feedback and your direction as we look forward to refining this plan and starting to implement certain pieces of it going forward. As an entering city, the redevelopment plan starts with the assumption that Englewood is really in a position where we have to be proactive in terms of redevelopment and revitalization in order to remain competitive regionally in terms of attracting and retaining. Thank you. In terms of attracting and retaining employers, retailers, residents, and jobs. And so we have to look to be really proactive to remain vibrant and financially viable. Thanks to our healthy regional economy, we are in a position where we can actually now we can specifically direct the redevelopment efforts to specific areas to enhance opportunities and quality of life. So the redevelopment action plan puts into motion a number of recent planning studies and documents and efforts. All of these involved input from industry experts, community leaders, the business community, and the public. These include the Englewood Comprehensive Plan approved by Council in 2017, as well as the other items listed here. Importantly, I think, are the Urban Land Institute Technical Advisory Panel that was conducted in 2016, and the Healthy Corridors National Panel study of Englewood that was conducted earlier this year. So just a little bit of background in terms of influencing trends. There are a number of macro trends in play which are impacting all of the cities in the metro area, including Englewood. We're all familiar with all the focus on millennials these days and the fact that they'll make up 50% of the workforce within the next 3 years. However, the thing that's forgotten a lot, and it applies very much so to Englewood, is that millennials and boomers are looking for the same things in terms of walkable, affordable, authentic communities. And we're seeing overlaps of millennials and boomers in terms of trends in Englewood. We are all familiar with the changing nature of retail. Big box retail formats are trending down, and there's strong demand for unique retail districts in close proximity to residential and other uses. We're seeing more demand for connectivity and mobility, and we'll see this in a number of our recommendations coming up. And we're seeing increasing demand for proximity to health care. So against this backdrop, the goals of the action plan are to really improve Englewood's attractiveness, vibrancy, and financial sustainability. We want to build on our strong quality of life and authentic character, while also minimizing the impacts of uncoordinated, market-driven redevelopment. We want to attract and retain employers, jobs, retailers, and residents, and protect and grow property values and tax revenues. We also want to generate new revenues to help fund redevelopment, infrastructure, and public services. And importantly, we want to take advantage of the remaining time left in the current market cycle. As is true of many inner-ring U.S. cities, Englewood faces some real challenges to remain competitive, vital, financially sustainable. And these include a small population relative to the entire metro area. So we're talking about roughly 35,000 versus 3.2 million. As you know, we have a land area that's almost completely built out with areas of aging commercial buildings and housing inventory. And as you well know, we have limited public funding at the moment to direct and sponsor redevelopment, infrastructure, and public services. But I would say, and it's important that this is really a foundation of the redevelopment action plan. Unlike a lot of inner ring cities in the U.S., the good news is Englewood has more opportunity to leverage our strong attributes to achieve a more vibrant and financially sustainable future. We really have a unique combination of attributes, and these include the central location that we have, 20-minute proximity to the two primary employment hubs in the area, downtown Denver and the Denver Tech Center. We have outstanding accessibility due to a strong road network and two commuter rail stations. We have a really thriving healthcare district anchored by two high-quality growing hospitals. And we have an authentic, friendly, small-town character centered in one of the fastest-growing metro areas in the U.S. We also have a comparatively affordable housing supply that offers opportunities for both first-time millennial buyers as well as move-down empty nester boomer buyers. So the redevelopment action plan that we'll go into in a little bit more detail has been designed within the Community Development Department to have lots of synergy with the well-established Economic Development Program. Both are managed within, as I said, community development. The redevelopment action plan focuses on the redevelopment and operation of the built environment, which includes buildings, infrastructure, and public spaces, whereas the development program focuses on attracting and retaining jobs, which has to be supported by the built environment. So the better we can support the built environment, the better we can empower the economic development program. The action plan priorities, we've really outlined 5 priorities for the early stage of the implementation of the action plan. Number 1 is better connect our commercial core, which consists of the Broadway corridor, city center area, downtown, and the healthcare district. And this was a recommendation that was really strongly emphasized by the Urban Land Institute in both of their recent studies. It was simply to better connect and integrate those areas of the commercial core that already exist, and by doing so drive stronger synergy, value, and more opportunity. Of course, the city center area is number 2 with the recent foreclosure of the Weingarten property, which we'll talk about here briefly. That actually opens the door to a variety of redevelopment opportunities that I think could really be exciting and actually well-timed. Number 3 is really for us to support the redevelopment and revitalization of the entire Broadway corridor with the initial focus obviously on downtown. Number 4 is to continue to support the growing healthcare district. We've recently initiated some more detailed and focused 3-way meetings with both Swedish and Craig, and plan to implement really some strong working group meetings on a monthly basis going forward. Number 5 is to address as needed underutilized key properties that are sitting and really look to be development opportunities for the future. As you're familiar with, this includes the Kmart site in Broadway and Bellevue, the former Rite Aid store at South Clarkson and 285, and the former Sports Authority property south of Hampton. And we think that from a redevelopment perspective, we can bring some strengths and opportunities to those redevelopment opportunities. So here's a graphic that kind of represents really the number 1 priority, which is the connecting and integrating of Englewood's commercial corridors. And again, it's really just this simple idea of trying to take the primary north-south corridor, South Broadway, and better connect it to the existing east-west corridor, which extends here from City Center over to the healthcare district. And of course, these two corridors cross, not surprisingly, right at downtown. And so what we really want to do is define this as the commercial core and let a number of our strategies pertain to strengthening the connectivity and integration of these areas. Of course, one of the nice things, and the ULI studies pointed this out, is that the north-south corridor as well as the east-west corridor really kind of divide the city into 4 quadrants, and each of those corridors are then supported by strong neighborhoods in each of those quadrants. Here's an aerial overview in addition to the map graphic. And just to give you some flavor of the implementation ingredients that we're dealing with, obviously this will include the outreach to and input from residents, business community, and other stakeholders. We'll have a good amount of selection and management of consultants. We want to be careful to leverage the staff's experience working with developers, financial institutions, RTD, and other stakeholders. There's a real asset there. We want to make sure that we do operate with a real sense of urgency because we have a limited time left in this economic cycle to get things moving forward. We want to creatively partner with employers, developers, and investors. And our hope is that the Community Development Department, following up on your feedback tonight, will continue to formulate redevelopment recommendations for your review and direction. We'll also touch on the pursuit of some early wins that we think we can get implemented in the next few months while we're working on some of the bigger picture things. Just general tasks. We're investigating some of the special district alternatives for financing, marketing, and operations within the commercial core. We're increasing communications with the commercial real estate industry to make sure that they're aware of redevelopment opportunities in Englewood. You know, having come from that industry and having been a Denver native, I can say that Englewood has actually flown below the radar in terms of the commercial development industry for a long time, and we think there's an opportunity to change that. As mentioned, one of the things also is we want to look at PUD entitlements that generate more community benefit from some of the redevelopment sites I mentioned. And last, certainly not least, we have a great opportunity to leverage Englewood's new Opportunity Zone designations that came out of the 2017 Tax Act. We're seeing lots of potential, lots of interest being generated by this as the Treasury Department is starting to move forward with specific regulations for how this program will work. In the city center area, some of the specific tasks we're working on is pursuing collaboration with the new owner of the former Weingarten parcel, which is called C3 Asset Management. We've initiated a series of meetings with them. We'll eventually come back to you and recommend possible use of ETH funding for appropriate legal and consultant expenses within the city's center district. At present, there's about $278,000 in savings that's currently available to fund those types of expenses. We hope to return and explore with you the use of requests for qualifications and requests for proposals to seek competitive proposals from private sector developers. And last but not least, we want to explore with you the possible adoption of an unsolicited proposal policy to encourage private sector developers to proactively submit creative real estate proposals, particularly here in the city center area. Here's some of the relevant background on City Center. What we have here is a site plan. The entire city center district, 55 acres, is outlined in yellow. The C3 asset management parcel is in red, which is obviously primarily along Hampton on the south side there, the bottom of the graphic. Blue represents parcels that are either owned by the city or by EAF at the moment. So they're primarily redevelopment opportunities west side of the parcel. And the C3 is, as I mentioned, the new owner of the Weingarten, former Weingarten property. So one of the things that's coming out of these early discussions with C3, as well as with some prospective buyers that have approached us, is that it looks like there's really kind of a natural synergy between the C3 parcel and the city-controlled parcels. And it's very likely that someone who's interested in buying and redeveloping a C3 parcel would also have great interest in talking to the city about its interest potentially in redeveloping one or more of the parcels that make up the city holdings. And so there's a synergistic opportunity here that we are taking a look at. We're trying to define rather than bring back to you for more specific discussion. In one form or another, though, the redevelopment efforts of the C3 parcel, possibly in combination with the city parcel, would re-energize the area, ensure its financial sustainability, and create new tax revenues, and we believe other development-related revenues for the city. So I jumped too fast there. Let me go back and just mention that we will come back to you with specific recommendations as we move forward. One of the things that we did want to mention, I know it's not a popular topic, but as we get further into specific negotiations and ideas and discussions of possible transactions, I think you may want to consider the use of some executive sessions or one-on-one briefings to get into greater detail on some of the transaction possibilities. This would allow for discussion of proprietary and confidential information typically isn't discussed in public settings and probably would not actually be in the best interest of the city to discuss publicly, at least in the early stages. Having worked on a number of large real estate transactions in Denver, I can tell you that many of those were conducted either in executive session or often very effectively in one-on-one meetings with council members. And that way we could really get into a lot of detail without compromising the confidentiality of potential transactions. Just here's a couple early win possibilities just to kind of give you a flavor for some things, some practical things that I think we can do, that we should be doing to kind of generate activity and lead into the value that I think can be developed with bigger redevelopment opportunities. The first one I've listed here is the Englewood trolley schedule. We're starting to have some initial conversations with the hospitals and other stakeholders in the commercial core about expanding the schedule of the trolley. As you know, right now it runs from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. I think our first hope is to try to get that extended to 8 p.m. so that we can actually support the predominant shift schedules at both hospitals and allow more of their employees to use the trolley and then light rail to access other places where they may live in the region. The future goals would be to achieve more evening and weekend service. And if we can expand what already is a great avenue available to the city because of RTD's funding, we think we can really use this to connect the healthcare district, the downtown area, and city center in a way that can generate a lot of synergy, support for our retailers, support for the hospitals, et cetera. I think it's doable, and particularly as we start looking at some of the special district opportunities that are available to gather and apply funding. I think we can find some very practical ways to expand the trolley schedules in ways that really help the entire commercial core. The other thing I wanted to mention is this, what has been referred to in the past as the Piazza Retail here at City Center, which is the retail in the Western Art Walks apartment building. That's approximately 16,000 square feet. As most of you know, has sat vacant for many years, and it's difficult space to lease. It's difficult space for a large owner to pay a lot of attention to, and we're hoping that coming out of this foreclosure that we'll be able to press C3 and or their subsequent owner to really collaborate with the city on activating that space. We think there are a number of ideas, just things like using that space for displays. We've talked to the Museum of Outdoor Arts about curating a number of those windows. We think that, again, startup businesses may be able to use some of those spaces. So we'd like to really put together a program that uses that great space that's immediately adjacent to Transit Center and the open space here at City Center to get some activity going and help support some of the artists and startup businesses here in Englewood. And so we've already let C3 know that that's high on our priority list, and it's something that we would hope would be brought into further conversations going forward. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. So, Council, let's take one or two questions at a time per council member to make sure everyone has a chance, and we'll just keep rotating through, so pop in and put your light on at the time. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
Was there a mortgage? Did Weingarten have a mortgage?
They had a loan with another source. It didn't involve any city money at all. They had a lender, and they did not have any personal liability on that loan. So if there weren't any negative consequences for them to walk away from that loan, which they did in November last year after attempting to restructure the debt.
And can you talk to us a little bit about the 75-year ground lease that the city or Eve sold Weingarten, and what areas on that map it covers?
Sure. Good question. So the ground lease to Weingarten, now C3 Asset Management, covers the area in red. And it was originally 75 years. It's down to 57 years now. And the short term that's remaining is actually one of the things that gives the city some considerable leverage in future discussions with C3 or their buyer. Because anybody who's going to want to buy that for redevelopment or contemplate future redevelopment is going to need a longer ground lease. They're going to need to get it at a minimum back to 75 years, possibly longer, and depending on how much capital they would be bringing to a redevelopment scenario, there's a good chance that they would raise the question with the city about whether a fee simple acquisition of that land could be considered. But at a minimum, they're going to need to get that lease term back to extended term to justify new dollars coming into the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can all of the public hear the response from Mr. Pro? Okay, when you're speaking, I think we can hear you because you're looking at us. So if you can, speak a little bit more. Sorry about that. Next person is Council Martinez.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation tonight. I'm really excited that we're talking about this, that we have some really great opportunities in front of us. I really love the early win possibilities, both of them. I've been wanting to expand the trolley for some time. We know the ridership is really high. Last time RTD was here, I think they said it's up there with the 0 bus that goes along Broadway and the 15 along Colfax. So I think expanding that would be really great. Any possibility to expand that in the more evening hours on our event nights? I've heard from a lot of folks that they would like to take that to our events here and back, but the schedule doesn't allow now. So I just want us to consider that.
I think, and I hope this is working. I'm not entirely certain it is.
Better?
But I think there is a good opportunity to do that. The timing is on our side in that the vendor contract to run that service will be rebid this coming year. And so our plan is to put all of the flexibilities, all of the alternatives that we want a vendor to consider into their bid. We'll put that in the RFP, and then they'll be forced to address that financially. And so we'll have an entire roster of alternatives and pricing for adding on those additional services over the year.
Fantastic. And then my second question is, how do you imagine we'll go about getting input from the community on these things as we work through them?
I think as we get some of our consultants on board, and I didn't mention, I think it's mentioned in your memo, but we have 2 early consultants on board. Tribal Architects was selected to help with some initial phase 1 revisioning, and another firm, 2 firms, Portel Works and Progressive Urban Management Associates were selected and contracted with for, again, an early phase scope to assist in evaluating the special service alternatives. But to answer your question, as we go forward with subsequent phases of that work, the public outreach will be an important aspect of their scopes, and I would see extensive outreach in all of those types of planning activities with very formalized and very different measures of getting public involvement and public feedback in the planning process.
Great. I think that is going to be important. Thank you.
Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. Dan Paremba, you talked about the piazza space being vacant for a long time, many years. In addition to that specific space, there are other spaces here at City Center that have also been vacant for maybe fewer than those years, but several years. In order to understand the relationship between those vacancies and the Weingarten foreclosure, which I don't believe or don't know is a direct correlation, do we know or have an understanding of the time frame in which Weingarten probably knew they weren't going to be able to continue ownership of these properties? Do you understand what I'm getting at? Because it almost seemed that you were correlating Weingarten leaving to vacancies that we can more easily address with C3PO. What is the name of this company?
C3 Asset Management.
Yeah. And I just want to understand that real linkage there and the feasibility of really what we're presenting here.
I think Weingarten's biggest problem, biggest challenge, was that they had a fixed investment in all of this retail space, about 219,000 square feet of space. And they hadn't been paying it down. It was a balloon payment. And they knew, they've been watching, kind of the trend of big box retail in this area. This is generally a big box retail project, and they know that the general trend is going to be down.
Am I the only one who doesn't know what big box retail means? I don't know.
It's the stores like, not only Walmart is the biggest of the big boxes,
I get
but you have the Ross, the Petco, the Office Depot. They're really generally called junior boxes, but everybody tends to lump them in the big box category too.
Thanks, Sam.
Long story short, we know that type of retail is becoming more and more out of favor as people generally buy more and more online. And so they were looking at a redevelopment scenario for City Center as well, but because they had the existing debt, they didn't have an ability, they had no leverage to renegotiate that debt now. And so they tried. They tried several times, but couldn't do it. And so the foreclosure became inevitable. Now, what will happen by virtue of the foreclosure is a new buyer will likely be able to come in at a financial basis in the property that's probably 50 to 60% of what the Weingarten cost basis was. Therefore, they'll be able to afford the additional investment dollars, and their total investment will have a redevelopment return that would be acceptable, where that could never be achieved by Weingarten. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I think what we all saw is over time, Weingarten organizationally had some appreciation for this, and they didn't put a full effort into marketing some of the smaller spaces, and as a result, they never got filled. And so, their ability to be creative and proactive in marketing those spaces decreased over time.
Okay, thank you. May I ask?
It's interesting. There was a new eye clinic that just leased 12,000 square feet on the second floor of the retail buildings there along Englewood Parkway, and that was done under the C3 regime. And so even before they took title, they were able to reach out and achieve that type of lease. And we think that's really exciting because it suggests, and the hospitals have actually told us this, that they would actually consider healthcare space requirements in the city center area. We may see more of that.
Very good. And one more question. Thank you. So, in order to understand the percentage of influence from this wonderful ULI study, on your action plan that had 5 items, what percentage of those are directly from the findings earlier this year from ULI, or approximately? Do you remember? Yeah. Or, sorry. It's a slide that looked like that, but it wasn't that one.
Commercial core connectivity. I think that sets a really good backdrop for essentially everything else on the list.
Okay.
So it's just a really important foundation that we keep in mind as we go along. So, whether we're working on City Center or downtown or Broadway or the healthcare district, part of what we want to be doing is make sure that everything we're doing within those sub-areas is tied into better connecting and integrating them into the other areas that make up the commercial core. And I think part of that also will be the way that we hopefully can bring all these sub areas into probably a special district strategy to be able to collect some dollars and apply those dollars for marketing, programming, and certain types of common operations. The trolley would be one, actually. Right. That would be a great candidate to be funded by a special district.
Good. Thank you, Dan.
Councilmember Sierra.
So in terms of next steps, what should we expect to see from the new buyers? Is it C3S? Is that correct?
C3 asset management.
Okay, asset management. Okay. In terms of timing and do they start coming back to the community development team in terms of redevelopment ideas, or just trying to get an idea of what the timing and what we should expect to hear in the coming months?
Good question. We don't know the answer to it yet. We've started to meet with C3 and ask them how long they think their sales effort will be, when they'll really initiate it. We've tried to talk to them about the idea that we hope we could collaborate with them up front before they take the property to market. We would like them to put a certain to direct the marketing effort in a certain way that's beneficial to the city, rather than just marketing an as-is, where-is dated retail center. We want them to actually talk about redevelopment potential, and subject to further conversation with you all about the city's willingness and eagerness, hopefully, to consider various redevelopments. So, long story short, I don't think they're a quick seller in terms of like right away, but I think it'll take some more meetings to really figure out where they're coming from and whether they will engage with us in that kind of collaboration or whether it'll be left up to their buyers. The other thing is we do want to come back to you and have some conversation about your appetite for redevelopment opportunities on the city-controlled parcel, the blue parcel. In some ways, that's actually less constrained than the C3 parcel. So there is a scenario where if we start to identify redevelopment opportunities there, we can actually combine that with and enhance the marketing potential of the C3 parcel. In other words, when you put the two parcels together, you have a bigger story. And it's a pretty cool story, being that it's right at a TOD station close in Metro Denver. I mean, on a national and even international real estate basis, that's high on everybody's radar right now. So we'd like to have a conversation with you about what the city's appetite might be to consider some redevelopment scenarios on the city-controlled parcels, and those can be non-binding, such things as non-binding requests for proposals that allow us to get redevelopment opportunities out into the market and allow you to see how the market would propose to move forward with some redevelopment ideas in ways that could be, right now, very, very advantageous to the city financially. So that's probably another study session.
It is, and you actually answered my second question, which was going to be, what were you expecting from council? But you answered a lot of that. So I do have a third question then.
Go ahead.
If we go back to the map that shows the three distinct areas, the downtown area, the healthcare district. So I'm just curious in terms of the area in between the downtown and what used to be the Weingarten property. So obviously there's land there. Are there distinct owners between, if we were to try to connect the three areas, I believe we may have other owners of property. So are we starting discussions with them at some point? Is that like a next step down the line? Or how exactly will we be able to tie in the three districts if there are other property owners involved?
There is an area in there that's owned by other institutional owners. And what we've thought about doing is, instead of trying to corral them into the initial planning process, try to really focus on the things that we have some level of control over. Here in City Center, Broadway, and the healthcare district, try to get those things moving forward and get that story defined. And then our thought is we can go to them and request their participation, whether it's in planning or other redevelopment activities, more easily. I think we've also gotten some indication that they're open to the future redevelopment of their sites. And so the more we do, the more that will encourage the eventual upgrading of those large, it's three retail properties really. So I think we can hasten their redevelopment by focusing on the things that are more under our direct control at the moment. Englewood Trolley, not to overemphasize that, but to the extent we have a transit connector like that, it will allow us to kind of skip over, if you will, some of those underdeveloped areas or future development areas without them being a negative or holding things back. Even within the healthcare district, there's kind of an area of slower redevelopment between the two hospitals and Broadway. So there's on both sides of Broadway. Right. There's kind of an area in there that's just going to be a little bit slower coming along, and the two ends of the dumbbell or the corridor, if you will hopefully drive that redevelopment as time goes on.
So it wouldn't slow down the vision that we have regarding that area. Good to hear. Thank you.
Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you, Mayor. And good evening, Mr. Paremba. Thank you for the presentation as well. On the 12th slide, the second bullet discusses increasing communications with commercial real estate industry to improve awareness of the real estate redevelopment opportunities in Englewood. So as I read that, that reads to me that those communications are currently underway and that they're looking to be increased as well. Can you explain to me how those are currently conducted and what you guys are hoping to do to expand on those efforts?
I think it's several-fold. One is just being responsive to developers and investors as they call, and we're getting, a few more calls these days where people will say what's going on in Englewood, and, especially if they're well qualified, and we can then engage with them, tell them on a very preliminary basis what's happening, what we think redevelopment opportunities are, and try to develop a dialogue with them, develop further as forward. I think one of the things we're doing also is reaching out back through the ULI to their membership and developers, and again, letting them know in a very general way what some of the early redevelopment opportunities in Englewood start to look like. And, a lot of this is stuff that they generally know. For example, there's a wave of redevelopment that's coming south kind of away from Denver.
Are you all still hearing? No. Okay. I
Okay.
think whenever you move from that, it just is not very strong. We might have you actually step
The
up
podium would be
here.
better.
Would you mind standing?
No, I don't mind.
I want them to hear this. We have a great crowd here tonight.
I think this is going to be better, yeah.
Is that better? Everybody? Yeah. Okay.
So part of it is just, in essence, reflecting back to the commercial development and real estate market and investment market, what's going on in Englewood. And some of it, as I was saying, is really some trends that they're already aware of. The redevelopment that's coming organically right now down Broadway, both in terms of commercial development as well as potentially the residential development on both sides of Broadway. So it's really, it's not a wholesale marketing effort. It's really kind of organic in terms of responding to interest from the marketplace and then working with real estate industry organizations like the Urban Land Institute to just talk about what looks to be some significant opportunities in Englewood. And there's a lot, as I mentioned, there's a lot of interest just by virtue of, our location in the metro market, our adjacency to transit stations and things like that.
Very good. Thank you. The second question is on the next slide, and the statement was utilize EAF funding for appropriate legal and consultant expenses within the city center district. In the financial analysis, I believe it marked that there's an opportunity for $278,000 in savings, and if I'm off on that figure, please feel free to correct me. Can you expand on how we would obtain those savings of $278,000 through this process?
They're already, and based on our discussions with finance, there are basically already savings that exist in the current assets of EAF, and they're there to be used for district purposes or foundation purposes going forward. And certainly our early review and discussion is that the retention of counsel, use of consultants for the future of the EAF district, whether it's EAF and or the city who's controlling it at some point, are legitimate expenditures of those funds that have been collected over the years.
Thank you. One final question, and this one I do ask you to, I guess, speculate just a bit, sir, but you mentioned the tremendous economic cycle that we're experiencing right now and how everything comes to an end. Do you guys have a figure in mind that you're using in terms of the amount of time we have to capitalize on that?
No one seems to know right now because we're actually at a point where we are in the longest economic expansion and certainly the longest real estate market expansion that we've ever been in. So we're in uncharted territory. So up until recently, the real estate market was getting kind of queasy about that, and I would say getting much more cautious about what they're doing. There seems to be, at least in Denver, a feeling that, everything is kind of going the way it should be, and, there could be another 2 or 3 years left to this real estate cycle. And certainly the way developers are investing in real estate projects that have that much time left to them suggests that the market generally is thinking that there's a safe period, if you will, of 2 to 3 years left, and that might be, on the minimum side. It could be longer than that, but I think it's prudent to be aware that we are in new territory, and generally speaking, we probably really do need to be operating with a sense of urgency.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Barentine?
Just a little follow-up on Councilmember Cuesta's question. The $278,000 savings, was that savings that the city had in paying EVE, or savings that EVE has in, well, it wouldn't be savings because the money that they garnered that they didn't have to spend, so they made a profit, or they've got that set aside. Which entity? The city paying EVE, we've saved $278,000, or EVE has accumulated as a separate entity $278,000?
It's, I would say, and I may have to defer to others more wise on these matters, but I would say that if you look at the general operation of EVE, which is to collect common area maintenance funds and then apply those, they've collected from all of the entities that participate, and I believe there's 6 entities. They've collected amounts over the years that exceed the amounts that they've spent for services, and that's basically what the $278,000 is.
Okay, because we'll need to get we'll need to get a little bit more information on that, because I guess what we had gotten was that the common area maintenance, we get a bill, everybody gets a bill, we divide it out by some formula, and that bill gets paid, right, which would not create an overage. So I guess we need to get a little bit more information on that. Thanks for the presentation.
Sure.
Thank you. Member Martinez, can I ask a couple questions before I come back to you? I have just some really quick ones. One is, and thank you for this presentation, this is probably one of the more exciting things to be doing at this point in time for us all. Do you know what happened to the Boomer Bond aging study, and whether the city still knows where we are in actualizing the findings from that? Do you know what I'm even talking about?
I do not.
Back in maybe the early 2000s, maybe 2012, 13, we did, Dr. Cog helped to fund from their aging entity within Dr. Cog, a Boomer study that looked at aging in the city of Englewood. And there is a study somewhere, maybe someone who's been in community development for a long time can find it, but I would love to see where we are with that, because we do have this interesting split of millennial versus those of us that are getting older. It seems faster than the millennials and how we age, but I would love to see how that could play into this too.
I think that's a great question, and we all get so focused on the millennials and how they're driving the market, but the reality is that the boomers are driving it very, very significantly, and no one talks or rarely talks about the fact that in many ways the millennials and the boomers want similar things out of their communities, out of their housing alternatives, out of their retail, et cetera. Yeah. And I think we have a really great opportunity because we have a nice mix going here in Englewood, and so I think we can continue to benefit from that.
Great, thank you. Maybe we can find that somewhere. And then the second one is, and I think we've seen this before, you may have it, someone in the back of some files, but do we have a market value comparison for housing in Englewood, sort of the average versus Littleton versus Denver versus Lakewood versus Sheridan, just to get a sort of a regional sense of where our average homeowner is sitting with the market value currently? And I know that probably has to be updated all the time, but I would love to see that data at some point too, just when we're talking about housing. Those are my two. And Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. You mentioned the key underutilized properties, Kmart, Rite Aid, and Sports Authority. From this redevelopment action plan perspective, do you see those in any particular priority order? I know they're all important.
I think there are things that are moving forward, particularly on the Kmart site and on the former Sports Authority property. So I think you'll be seeing those projects in the very near term, and I think the city will have more opportunity to have discussions about the trade-offs that can be available under a PUD entitlement type of approach. And for example, on the Sports Authority property, it's very close to City Center. The project that's moving forward there appears to be a multifamily apartment project that would add a lot of new residents in close proximity to City Center, which is great. I mean, that's really what's envisioned, is that kind of residential mixing with the retail and other uses. So one of the conversations, and I know Wade Burkholder and his team have been working on this, is how do we get some kind of participation from that developer in making sure that that project is safely connected to the city center area, so that those residents can safely access not only the station but the retail here, and that we can benefit from that kind of synergy going forward. Yeah.
Councilmember Sierra.
So just regarding the ask that you have of council, how quickly can we see, or how quickly do you expect us to see some of the items that you requested? It's actually on the screen there. Regarding no, not the quick wins. It's going to be the unsolicited proposal policy to encourage the private sector to proactively submit creative real estate proposals for council consideration. Things like that, should we expect to see something within the next couple months, or is it in 2019?
I would love to get on your schedule to have that conversation as soon as possible, because in large measure, those are no risk policy decisions, but they obviously require direction from council to move forward. But in some respects, they're kind of easy, because other communities have put them in place, have utilized them. There are track records that show how they work. And again, there's not a financial or a transaction risk to the city, because if there's nothing that's generated that you like or want to consider, you don't have to. But it does require a policy decision from you to allow us to get those packages together and get them out into the marketplace. But long story short, we'd like to do it sooner rather than later, as soon as possible, really.
So, and then one more question. So, talking about risk, and kind of to touch on the point by Councilmember Cuesta. So, since we are in this economic cycle, when do the risks begin in terms of, risk to the city, or risk with starting late, or, we're not taking on any risk at this point, but when do the risks actually begin for the city?
Well, that's an interesting question, because in some regard, the risks, we are incurring risks to the extent, like in City Center here, that time goes on and we're not interjecting the city's objectives into the process. We're facing an increased probability that we will have a, slowly dying retail project. And so the sooner that we can have an intervention, if you will, into that process, the more we can manage some of the risk for the city in terms of not only the sales tax and other revenues, but really just the general, state of this property in terms of, is it doing for the city what it should be doing in terms of really being a central gathering place and identity for the city. So, no, we're not financially at risk in the short term, but I think it is definitely in the city's best interest to move proactively forward as quickly as possible.
Right, the risks are indirectly.
Yes.
At this point.
Yes.
Thanks.
Great. Councilmember Barentine.
I think we were at risk. I mean, the minute Weingarten had a competitive interest across the street at River Point, where they did do box stores, and it seems to have been fairly successful over there. But that's where they put their interest in, and they didn't put it in here. So we've kind of been behind the 8 ball. For a shopping center to be in the shape, a retail center like this, to be in the shape that it's in after only, 15 years with some spaces that have never leased, it's been a failed project. And so I agree that we need to interject some, and the only reason we're talking about it now is because Weingarten is off the table now, and now we have some other people that we can speak with. Not Miller Weingarten, I guess just Weingarten now. So I would like to get a little bit more information. It is just on the other side of Santa Fe, therefore the state of our competitors and what's going on there and what they're bringing in. Also, the private sector, it hasn't been as much synergy, just kind of organic, what's been going along South Broadway. You've had some very big property owner players going in that kind of know how to get some sustainable businesses in, and we've seen some really good energy going on down there, as well as on the south side coming north on Broadway as well. So if we could kind of see what's been working there and why that's been working, I would be interested in how that connectivity is going to happen for us. Also, the ownership piece of it, you made a comment about the Sports Authority property, that there's going to be some residential piece of that, and the what this council's been talking about for some time since I've been back on is impact fees and how to go ahead and accomplish making something like a residential area that was in a industrial area and then connect it to something that it was never meant to be connected to, which is the transit-oriented district across 4 lanes of Hampton in an area that was never built, has no amenities or infrastructure, and what kind of cost we would be looking at. If we just look at the Sports Authority incentive that we did at the time, that was $750,000 that we gave incentive to Sports Authority. They're out of business now. We will never recoup even close to the money that we gave back in that. That wasn't a good decision. So bring some, if we could kind of explore some additional ideas on how we would partner with that infrastructure and what kind of potential enticements or conversations to bring people to the table that you think is going to be necessary, because I think council is really going to need to be honest about what we're willing to bring to the table as far as any kind of incentives or requirements on new development in the area. So if we could see what's going on around us as well, and especially across Santa Fe, I would appreciate it. Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
Yes, thank you. I have a few questions. First of all, thank you for the work you've done on this and the presentation tonight. On the map that connects City Center with the medical district and east of Broadway, just east of Broadway, there are residential properties in that area, probably Lincoln, Sherman, and Grant, and Logan. What's going to happen to all those residential properties? And how soon can we expect things to start happening there?
I think it's fair to say that within the hospital district, the healthcare district, we're seeing a lot of activity right now on the residential side. I don't get as involved in that as some of my colleagues within community development, the specifics, but it seems to me we're seeing a lot of upgrading, a lot of new projects, a little bit more closer to the hospital. But I think as the hospitals continue to expand, those will see the value of the residential on those streets increase, and there will will probably be redevelopment opportunities, sale and redevelopment opportunities for those owners. And that's probably just a natural evolution of the continued growth of the hospitals.
So do we have a time frame? The only reason I'm asking this question is I've had some of the residents call me very concerned about what's going on in their areas. And there's some residents that have lived there for a very long time.
They have a right to be concerned. Obviously, it's a matter of change in the area, and there's an increasing rate of change right now. The good news, hopefully, is that most of the ones who are calling you are owners, and they will benefit considerably from increasing value of their properties. And, you know, in some cases, opportunities to stay in place. It may be in a different type of residential unit, but still stay in that neighborhood.
Okay, so I appreciate that. Just don't be the last to sell. That's all I'm saying. Then this is totally different. If we expand the Englewood trolley, is it going to continue to be free? I mean, it's really not free. Are we going to continue to expect the taxpayers to pay? I know RTD has been providing some of it, but the taxpayers have been paying the bill.
Well, RTD generally provides about 75% or more of the total cost. So it's really a tremendous opportunity for us to build on their foundation of financial support. Whether it stays free or not, I think is something that we just have to collectively evaluate and look at the options and weigh the options. Part of it will depend on how much other stakeholders in the community step up to the line and pay their fair share. We're suggesting to the hospitals that there is a fair share that they need to pay because it benefits their patients, their families, their staff, their employees, and we haven't gotten to a final answer yet with them about how much they would be willing to step up. So it's a good question. I think the starting point is that we'd sure like to see it remain free. Mm-hmm. But what's the fair balance there? And I think that probably just requires more work.
Okay, thank you. Also, you mentioned that we have 3 contractors already on board. I didn't catch the first one, Portel Works and PUMA.
Right.
Did City Council approve those?
They're small enough contracts that they were part of the 2018 budget, but they were also below the amount that required council approval. And what we were trying to do, they're sub $25,000 contracts. What we were trying to do is really because of the C3 situation, there was really some urgency to get some additional help on board so that we could be prepared to have some intelligent conversations with C3. And so that was what drove, I think, the necessity of getting those contracts in place.
Okay, thank you. And then
Can I please let, you've had 3 questions. Let me go on.
No, I said I had a few questions. None of them have
Can I
required.
let Councilmember Wink go next, and then
That's
we'll come
fine.
back. Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, Dan. I was super excited to come to council tonight just to have this discussion. And thanks for all the work you're doing. Maybe this isn't the question so much, but I'm curious about involvement in representing arts and culture in the development of the city. And I know that your work with DIA most certainly involved a lot of that in building the airport city. Is there anything to that effect that you can discuss tonight, or shall we just wait patiently to see how that's going to look?
I think it is really important. It's one of those magic ingredients to what we have here.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have, we have a history and culture of art. We have the Museum of Outdoor Arts right here. We have a cultural arts commission that's well staffed with some real expertise. So we have a lot of ingredients to work with, and I think it absolutely will be part of the synergy of the redevelopment tactics going forward.
Yeah, a lot of developing downtowns or developing areas tie so much into including arts and culture and the historic sentiment or importance of that particular area. So I know that's one of the key ingredients to successfully developing a city space. So thanks for saying that. Good.
Back to Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
That's okay, I pass.
All right. I have a few more questions that are probably more kind of like concept-driven. In the slide on the general tasks, in the very last statement, it's leveraging Englewood's new Opportunity Zone designation with the 2017 Tax Act. We haven't really taken advantage of that, have we, yet? And what would that look like? What are you all dreaming about in that area?
We're right where others are in terms of trying to understand it. I would say we're probably ahead of many others because we know that because most of our commercial core is really in an opportunity zone, that it is an opportunity. And so we're trying to find out as much as we can about it. We are applying to the state right now for a grant that would help us prepare a community investment prospectus that would then put us in a position of being able to help every property owner who is trying to benefit from the opportunity zones, so that instead of them trying to create the background documents to explain to their lenders and to their investors what this opportunity zone really means, that we would be able to provide them with the background documents and really accelerate their pace of financing their projects. And the other thing, it's really interesting that it's not only a real estate measure, but it allows capital gains to be deferred for investments in actual businesses. So for us in Englewood, with all the small businesses and the small businesses that want to come here, we want to understand what the Opportunity Zone does for that opportunity to really help bring capital to new small business opportunities in the city. So we are in a little bit of a wait and see because the federal government is trying to move forward with its regulations, but at the same time we've been attending state functions and again trying to move ahead with some of the grants that are available to help us prepare to be in the middle of it as things start to unfold, most likely next year.
My second question would be, we have a lot of people here, and I'm sure that those that are listening too are wondering about what some next steps would be, and I don't know what else you need from us tonight because you did want some direction, I believe. I don't see anybody else asking any further questions here, but if you do, if you have something else, light up your light. But what would the next steps be, and how do we make sure people are involved? I'm concerned about several different business districts and downtown area particularly to be able to have a voice in this, and there's some places that are totally vacant, so there's really no voice except the big companies. But how do we really connect people in with breathing more input into this?
I think just knowing that now you have a sense of what we've been doing and where we want to head with your approval, I think you have a sense that we want to come back to you for specific direction on the RFP, RFQ, and unsolicited proposal policy decisions. We'll come back to you with specific findings on the recommendations for special district opportunities to kind of move this forward and tie these areas together. So I would say, it's really kind of a matter of finding time on your schedules for the next study session, and we'll try to get as much as we can into that, and there are further things that we can bring you up to speed. Then we'll have more results. We will have more graphic analysis from Triba architects that we can go over at that time. We'll also know more in terms of how C3 is reacting to our recommendations, that we collaborate and give this a certain amount of time and what the benefits are for them. So I would say that there's at least one, probably more study sessions that's really a continuation of this dialogue. And I think having a chance to also connect with the public, as we really try to do this time through email, through the city site, and through social media is helpful. And we can start to get some of their feedback through community development, which we've done even leading up to this meeting.
One more, Councilmember Wink.
Thank you. So, can I make a council request? Is it possible to have Mr. Paremba and team at our very next study session? Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, you know what the schedule looks like far ahead. I don't want to lose steam on this. It's so important to do this in a timely manner. I want us to be as specific as we can be today rather than let it go. If you're ready to present.
We'll be ready. We have a lot of stuff that's coming up to the point that it can be really discussed.
Yeah. Hey, Brad.
If I can interject, the next study session is scheduled for November 5th, where council is asked to study specifically the questions surrounding EAF. There may be some synergy, but it's just an hour before the regular meeting, so there may not be time for a lot of presentation, but we can schedule it promptly.
Yeah.
It's before the regular meeting night, so we only have an hour.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but I think that's really key, and I think we all know that that's a sort of an obstacle we have to get through together to figure out where we go with at least the city center area. So that one's timely. We do have time on November 13th that right now has a code enforcement discussion, so I think we could add some in there because that's a full evening of study session. So
I certainly wouldn't want to cut short the redevelopment discussion. Maybe we can shoot for that?
Yeah.
That would be great.
Okay.
That would be fantastic, and I think you're sensing some of our enthusiasm. I mean, you guys deal with a lot of serious, matters, and this is certainly serious, but you have a really exciting opportunity here on multiple levels, and it's really about placemaking and city building, and so you have some exciting opportunities ahead and some really great policy opportunities to work through.
Good.
Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
Yes, and actually, so the question that I also had, which may need to go to our study session with EAF, since EAF was established to mitigate asbestos and other environmental issues, this is a totally different thing, and I think we probably should look into the fact of whether we can continue with EAF going down this road.
I think that's fair to say. Most cities do have a real estate or a development entity that's involved in the types of transactions that we would see again coming up, but it probably is a different orientation than EAF was, as you pointed out. And I think the other thing that we talk a lot about internally is transferring some of the maintenance and operation responsibilities and risks for City Center back to the private sector. And I think there'll be opportunity to consider that in the context of some of the partnering discussions with potential developers. So, yeah, I think you're right on there.
Okay, thank you very much.
I was assuming that's what we're doing with this EAF and EMRF discussion, is we are going to talk about whether or not it is relevant to continue it anymore, and how, if it gets unwound, how it gets unwound legally, and how it would play. And so I would hope that you would all come with enough information for us to at least begin that. I know we can't decide that in one event, but we certainly would like a lot of background info and possibilities for the future with that. I think that's what we were all asking for in putting it on the study session.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I have a ton of other questions, but I'm sure others do too. How would you like us to best give those to you? Because we're done with our time for this now, but do you want us just to email and put them into sort of a catch-all study council request?
That would be
Or do we just keep funneling questions in and we all can keep, because things may come up after tonight. Does that make sense? Okay.
If you could funnel those through me, I'll make sure that Dan and his team get that, and we'll treat it as council requests and include it in the information.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the work you all have done. All right. Can we go on to the next one without a break, or you all doing okay?
Could we have a quick break?
We certainly can. I think whenever anybody needs a break, let's take one. So let's take a 5-minute break, and we will come back, and item number 2 is our financial report. So let's take a 5-minute break and be back for that. No,
My
I was thinking it
mother-in-law-
was.
Well, there's a famous Barbaros.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe even a puppy. My mother-in-law in Minnesota.
In Duluth?
No, she's in Minneapolis.
Or she's in
She
But
had
you
a
grew up in
trunk
Duluth,
show.
right?
You know, he just went to school there.
UMD, that's right.
Right.
Oh, okay, I just missed that.
Water.
I gotta go to the bathroom.
Anyway, she had a trunk show this weekend, and a lot of the clothes, I said, God, out there, they just looked like so she bought my sister-in-law and me, she can have daughters.
Yeah.
She bought us a sweater. It was all stuff that you wear.
That I wear?
Yes.
Oh man, can I be adopted?
I know.
Adopt me.
Good, yourself? Oh, they said the dental nuggets. They're having a heck of a season. That's a more inspiring story. I think. But yeah, absolutely. Okay, you bet. I'd be happy to. How about? Do you want to maybe just jump on a call? If that works for you.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
gonna be in Florida
When are you going?
Wednesday to Sunday.
I'm in Florida Thursday and Friday.
Are you where?
Tallahassee, Thursday, and Miami
Oh my goodness.
Friday.
Are
I mean,
you
we're there 48 hours, but yes, it's short-lived. Yeah, small world. It's not a small world out there, I'm told.
No,
I
it
know
isn't.
the
Is
outcome
it?
that
No,
well.
it's funny
but,
that we're going to the same
yeah,
Miami side anyway.
that is. Well, I mean,
So
even
maybe
if
next
it,
week.
that was
I'm
fine.
back on
Okay.
Sunday. We're staying an extra day because
I'll,
Yeah.
oh, very good. Sure. You're planning it for them? You're taking all the work out of it. That's helpful. Do your kids watch the meetings? I'm impressed if they do.
Maybe I'm going to add a DJ.
That would take more coordination, I think, and my arms are too tired.
That's good to know. Thank you. My recording. Listening to
Recording.
That's making my son in the
Oh, no.
All right, are we going again?
It's been more than 5 minutes.
Dan. My purse.
All right.
Your wife is brilliant. Rita, it was. I went to reach in there.
Council could take their seats. We'll.
It was there.
Thank our
you,
5
Dan.
minutes are nice 10. That's nice. So we're all. Our next item, agenda 2, is our financial report for September 2018. Our acting finance and administrative services director, Maria Sobota, is here and presenting this to us.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. So I've submitted this report, and I'll just let you know this is the first time I am presenting this information to you. So any guidance you would like to give me regarding the information that is shared would be appreciated. I also just want to start by saying I, too, am evaluating the material that we present to you, and I'm thinking about it, and if I decide that there might be a different way to present, what I will do is share the information that you have in front of you today, continue to present that, but then also show you some examples of something that might work a little bit differently and perhaps better, because I believe that any information that's provided in these reports should, be based on, just awareness for you about things that we need to watch, or perhaps just informational. And I'm not certain that the information that, as it's presented, links up to some of the budget things that we've been showing, and I just want to make sure we have that connection in the future. So in September, we are 75% of the year through, and year-to-date revenues through September exceed expenditures by approximately $4.9 million. And the areas where we have the increased revenue are documented in the memo, and then in the back of the packet on page 7, it actually explains why some of those differences have occurred year to date. I also want to say that the revenues collected are also better than the budget at 82.9% collected. However, the prior year comparisons aren't relevant because of the New World conversion last year. There is a week of data that will actually carry forward into October from 2017, so the year-over-year comparisons will be back on track at the end of October. The year-to-date expenditures also remain lower than budgeted at 70.5% spent, and again, the same comparison year-over-year is skewed because of the Tyler New World conversion. So revenues exceed expenditures primarily due to the seasonality of revenues that when they're collected. So the property tax and also Pirates Cove, and we do expect leveling out by the end of the fiscal year. The other item that I wanted to talk specifically about before opening it up for questions is on page 5, where it actually shows that September of 18 revenues collected are less than what was collected last year. In researching that, there was a Sports Authority payment based on an audit for $76,000 last September, and there were also some other small revenues that were collected that made the difference year over year. So I thought that might be a question that you would ask based on the fact that that was actually lower year over year. So with that, I can open it up to questions. I can't promise I'll have the answers just yet. I've been focused on the budget. I don't think there's anything, before you ask any questions, I don't think there's any risks for revenue or expenditures, which I think from a big picture perspective, that is what you would be most interested in, and also maintaining the level of reserves, not only for policy, but also slightly above. We expect that to continue. So I don't see any big gotchas that I want to make you aware of tonight.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. For the marijuana sales tax, it says in September we generated $459,000. Is that more than we estimated for the year of 2018? Do you know?
I do not know
like
that
it's
answer,
higher.
but I will definitely look into that for you. I'll make that a council request if that's okay with you, and get
Sure.
back to
Yeah,
you.
I was just curious because it seems like it's trending higher than we thought it would. So thank you.
Absolutely happy to look into that.
Councilmember Sierra.
In the month of September, we had the block party, so this does take into account the revenues we experienced from the block party. Is that right?
I don't want to say unconditionally yes, because I would assume so, but I'd like to look into it just to make sure that if there were any that we expect in October, that it will be recorded. So if I could get back to you on that.
Do we have any unofficial feedback regarding the block party based on the residents or anything like that, or residents, the businesses?
Okay, you know what, and now it's coming back to me. I have had discussions about the block party, and we do expect that we won't be able to close it out for a couple of months yet, and I think that is one of the council requests that is still outstanding, if I recall correctly, that I actually, now that I recall, I responded to it just saying that information would be forthcoming after the month of November, I believe, because we are still getting some revenues and expenditures. We haven't paid all of the invoices yet for that. So expect that you will hear back from me regarding that as soon as we feel like we've closed that particular item. Is that fair?
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Barentine.
With the reports not due until the 15th of the month, are you sure that that period of time would be included in this report? I mean, how fast do you put them together? It's usually my understanding that it takes a couple of weeks after the closeout of the month. So you're not receiving all of the reports for September until the deadline of October 15th. And then generally, we were told before that that takes at least a period of 1 to 2 weeks further out to go ahead and make sure that that's included in the financials.
Can you help me understand your question a little bit better?
Well, when he's asking about the income from the businesses for the block party,
which occurred in September.
Which was in September.
Yes.
And then that reporting is due on October 15th, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But I guess I clarified it by saying that we would not be closed out at least until November on the revenue side, and expenditures could go even longer than that depending upon when we receive invoices from the vendors, and that I would report back as soon as I felt we had all of the information gathered.
All right, I misunderstood. I thought you were just saying that only the expenditures were a problem and that you were already including that in there. So when you spoke at first, then I guess you clarified that later. So
thank you for letting me clarify.
We don't have that information for either the revenue or the expenditures until next report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. I did have a question. I think what I was wondering about, and perhaps this is what Councilmember Barentine was hearing at the beginning. So for the week that was missing last year, or with the changeover to the world, what do you call it?
Tyler New World.
Yeah. So there's one full week. Is that's
in the month of September? So it was the activity that occurred it's my understanding through Kevin Engels that the information from September of 2017 was a week in September for that month was actually recorded in October.
Okay.
So the year-over-year comparisons are incorrect, but we will catch up year-over-year next month.
Right. And so it'll be at the end of October that gets sort of clear again.
Yes.
All right. Great. That makes sense. And then my final thing is, I think if you have new ways to display any of this, give it to us. I think we always like to understand our finances in a different way, and if you think the kinds of questions we're asking, it would be better displayed in a way that we'd get it when we first read it. Some of these are unusual ways to display some things, and I'm sure there was someone else's sort of way, but we get used to them. But I welcome any new ideas and new ways to do this. Councilmember Barentine.
If you could just clarify again, then which month is understated and which month is overstated?
October 2017, I'm sorry, September 2017 is understated. The last week of activity in September 2017 was recorded in October of 2017, last year, because of the conversion.
But we don't have all of the numbers in for that, so once that's closed out, you'll be caught up once October's closed. Okay.
Yes, thanks for the question. When I come back next month, the year-to-date comparisons will be correct.
All right, thanks. I just was interested in which one got moved.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
Looks like Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess along that same note, there was the Grand Doozy concert. I think it was September 14th and 15th, and that was in Overland Park. But I thought Area 1 might see some bump from that. Just initially here, I'm not really seeing too much of an increase. But again, after things get closed out and we see the finalized reports next month, maybe it'll be there. But I really thought there'd be more of an uptick. That's just more my thoughts. And you didn't hear anything even anecdotally regarding any bump from city businesses regarding the Grand Doozy Festival?
Thank you for the question. No, I did not, but I will look into that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we have no more questions.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Our third item tonight is the comprehensive plan update. Planner 2, John Voberall, is here to present and give an update on the comprehensive plan. And my understanding of some of this is to also get from us an understanding of how we want to go about reviewing the comprehensive plan within the next several months, because that is our goal overall, is to keep reviewing it and going back. And I think Councilmember Cuesta, you asked for some very specific areas, so that's what he's here also to get some of that. So thank you for being here.
All right. This evening I'm here to give a comprehensive plan and long-range planning update, and I have structured my PowerPoint presentation into 4 different areas. First off, I will kind of give a discussion about the Englewood Forward planning process and what the key parts of that are and what came out of that. Then I will then move towards city accomplishments since the adoption of Englewood Forward. The last 2 years, we've kind of documented all the things the city have come to a city in terms of development and other things that we have done in order to implement the comprehensive plan. Thirdly, I will go over quickly the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended work program to kind of refresh you on that, what they recommended to go forward in the next few years. And then we'll talk about the indicators update. We gave you an indicators update last year in August. We would like to do another one here coming up in the first quarter of 2019. Data is supposed to be available from the American Community Survey, new data, so that we can do that for you. All right, let's talk about Englewood Forward. So Englewood Forward is 3 different documents. We had the Englewood Forward, the 2016 comprehensive plan. That was done by a consultant for us. We also, why is this going? Okay. Then we had the light rail corridor next step study. That was funded primarily by a grant from the Denver Regional Council of Governments to look at our light rail corridor infrastructure plan and some economic feasibility as well for redevelopment of City Center. And then we also had the Walk and Wheel Master Plan and Program, which was funded by Kaiser Permanente, $100,000. No city money went to that at all. It was just totally free. All right, let's talk about the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan is, of course, a policy document made of goals and objectives. And so a lot of our goals and objectives came forward from the 2003 comprehensive plan as is. However, the consultant also recommended some additional goals and objectives. And then council did a very thorough review of all the goals and objectives and made small changes here and there. I believe the most significant change was to the historic preservation goals and objectives. I don't know why it's doing that, but I'm sorry about that. So the comprehensive plan has 6 theme areas. Live pertains to housing, goals and objectives. Work pertains to business and employment, goals and objectives. Shop pertains to retail and restaurant, goals and objectives. Move pertains to all sorts of ways of getting about the city, whether that be by road, transit, bus, light rail, bicycle, walking. And then learn is a little bit more broader. Of course, it would be educational goals and objectives, but also it includes cultural arts as well as environmental quality goals and objectives. And then finally, we have play, which refers to parks and recreation goals and objectives. So for in the 2003 comprehensive plan, that we were basically looking at a plan with just goals and objectives. It also had some text to kind of say, well, we expect some growth and change over here at City Center, or maybe at the Oxford Station, or at the hospital district. But there was no maps, no visuals for any of that. And so that's one of the best things that came out of our new plan, is that we have these neighborhood maps now. And so this example here is the Bates-Logan neighborhood. And basically, it kind of shows where the catalytic activity is expected for that neighborhood, where there's transition areas, and where there's no change expected at all. So on the Broadway corridor, as you can see there in red, that is where the most intensive change is expected to occur over the next 20 years. Then you have, following that to the east on Lincoln Street, some orange areas that are zoned as mixed-use zone districts, and there could be some change that happens along there as well. And then to the farther east, when you have Sherman and Grant and Logan, that's kind of depicted in yellow as the transitional area. And for an example of a transitional area change that might happen, the comprehensive plan suggested allowing accessory dwelling units in these residential transition areas. And then, of course, you have the area to the east from Pennsylvania to Downing that has no color, and that is deemed as an area of stability where no change, not any significant change is expected to occur. Moving on to the stationary master plan next step study. The precursor to the next step study was a stationary master plan, which was also funded by the Denver Regional Council of Governments primarily. It envisioned 4 different neighborhoods, yellow, orange, red, and purple, to the various areas such as GIW, the City Center area, Oxford Station, and then out west, there you see across the river in yellow. Some of the key items that it identified that were important items were the Englewood Parkway Promenade, also the rail trail, which would be a north-south connection connecting both Oxford Station, Englewood Station, and the GIW area. Then it also identified the Floyd Avenue extension out west. However, in the next step study, that was deemed to be not feasible from an engineering standpoint. And so it was replaced with a pedestrian bridge that would go from the Englewood Station across Santa Fe as a pedestrian bridge. Also, it identified the Dartmouth, Clarkson, and Oxford protected bikeway loop as a important bicycle loop that it would make to the hospital district and then back over. And then also finally the Southwest Greenbelt Trail extension, which is not depicted on this diagram. In addition to the next step study, looking at all the infrastructure options and seeing whether they were engineering and feasibility from an engineering perspective, there was also done in the next step study a real estate feasibility analysis. This was done to see whether the greater city center area had the potential to be repositioned. The conclusion was that yes, it can be repositioned. However, some of these stipulations must be followed in order to make that successful, and that some of those include that the city must commit to a higher quality placemaking and design, more along the lines of Belmar in the second picture. There must be a transition towards entertainment-focused retail, theaters, indoor sports and games, eating and drinking establishments. There must be a coupling of the entertainment uses with more urban residential densities. It must include aging shopping centers to the east in addition to City Center in order to create a critical mass that's large enough to get that kind of synergy going to support all that. And the area has the potential to capture additional office space when the repositioning is complete. And local models might include the 9th and Colorado project, which is at the top photo. And there's a lot of restaurants and a movie theater that's going to be going in there. The second photo is Belmar, which has been in the community for quite a while, but it does has a more higher quality DNA in its streetscape than we have here. And then finally, the last picture is a photo of what the downtown Westminster development will look like. That's the old Westminster Mall, and the city of Westminster is just getting underway with some initial projects there as well. Moving on to the Englewood Walk and Wheel Master Plan and Program. The main thing that came out of that plan were these quick win projects. Quick win projects are identification of early action opportunities that are realistically achievable in the near term, address serious safety needs, or make critical connections to high demand destinations. In terms of bicycle quick win projects, we have Clarkson, Dartmouth, Oxford, Floyd, Sherman, Irving, Union. We have done Clarkson last year. So if you've been over there, there's Sharrow markings on the street and new signage on the Cherry Hills Village side of the road. That's from Bellevue to Dartmouth. We are in the final design stages of Dartmouth, and as I understand it, Public Works would like to get that done by the end of this year. Oxford, that features bicycle lanes, also kind of nearing final design, and we expect that to be implemented next year. And then Floyd needs some additional design work, and we haven't gotten started on Sherman, Irving, or Union. Pedestrian, the main thing that came out of that was wayfinding signage for Englewood Station, downtown, the Medical District, and Little Dry Creek. Can't really see that very well. I'm going to look at my paper copy then. All right, let's talk about some of the accomplishments that the city has had in the last 2 years. Going back to developments and major remodels, we've seen quite a number of large residential developments, including the Broadway Nakoma Lofts, Oxford Station, Transition Senior Living, 1100 East Girard, and Foundry Townhomes and Lofts. We've also had a number of commercial successes as well. Some new buildings as well as remodels. Some of the new buildings are Williams Jewelers, Chick-fil-A, the Hampton Center retail pad near the bank building, a Rite Aid that unfortunately has gone dark because Walgreens has purchased it. But we are working to get that refilled as well. The Logan Street retail pads across from Safeway, And then we have these remodels, a lot of remodels in the downtown area, a lot of entertainment-oriented stuff such as El Tep, Duffer House, Whiskey Biscuit, Tabletop Tap, and there's one in the medical district that I'm kind of fond of, this Bosporus Turkish restaurant just north of La Cucina Taco, 3493 South Downing, only 700 square feet in size. In terms of mobility projects, we have completed the mid-block crossing in the 3,400 blocks of South Broadway. Once again, I'll recognize the Clarkson Street bicycle share markings, Dartmouth to Bellevue. Dartmouth Avenue is in design and expected to be completed this year. Oxford Avenue will be completed next year. And then Floyd Avenue probably will be done in 2020. The Mary Carter Greenway East Leg from Union.
John, you're one ahead. Sorry. On the slides.
Oh. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Mary Carter Greenway is going in from Union to Oxford, and also under construction is the Safe Routes to School project, Broadway at Mansfield, featuring bulb outs, high visibility crosswalks, and countdown timers. And then the Harvard Gulch Trail reconstruction was also completed in 2017. In terms of parks and recreation, Rotolo Park and Bellevue Park received some upgrades. Rotolo Park added a playground and a picnic shelter. And Bellevue Park, the upper part of the park, has a new road, a parking lot, a vault toilet, picnic shelter, and landscaping. In terms of housing programs, our main housing program is E-Cubed, which is funded by community development and block grant funds that come from Arapahoe County and originally from the federal government. These are energy efficiency grants for low mod income households. We have $96,000 for 2017 and 2018. That makes, it's about 12 apiece per each year. And then we also were able to fund some storm assistance grants. At this time, we have 16 approved, 0 in review, 6 needing additional documentation, a total of 22 for $24,000. The economic development programs. So I think our biggest hit for that was the Opportunity Zone designation for 4 census tracts. Those are areas that will be eligible for new federal tax breaks designed to entice real estate and investment transactions. We've also do a number of different grants for businesses. There was one business environmental compliance grant. Also, there was business flood recovery grants, 5 of those. And let's see, business initiation grants, we had 11. Business acceleration grants, 4. And business training scholarships, 5. Primary employer incentives, 1. Partnership with Aurora South Metro Small Business Development Center, free consulting workshops, a total of 10. And then we've established these partnerships. We've established partnerships with the Mi-Casa Resource Center, which offers bilingual small business training opportunities, and partnerships with the Manufacturing Edge, which serves as the state's Office for Area Manufacturers. And then we've also last month had a Manufacturing Day and Month celebration. In terms of cultural arts funding, that's funded from the Scientific and Cultural Arts Funding Districts. Covers things like the Summer Concert Series, Kid Stage, Englewood Drama Program, Movies in the Park, pop-up concerts, chalk art, and the Holiday Express event. We had $16,000 for 2018, and we have a little bit of bump this next year to $19,114. In terms of Keep Englewood Beautiful, the Household Hazardous Waste Program for 2017 saw a record of 564 carloads of material. The leaf and tire drop-off in 2017 also saw a record of 728 carloads of material. Also held the holiday lighting event with 7 participating households, and also held a composting education class led by master composters from Denver Urban Gardens with 15 attendees. And we recently had the 2018 Household Hazardous Waste, and that has decreased quite a bit, but they have told me that it's still pretty pretty good, pretty average for what they've had in the past years. So we don't really know why it was so popular in 2017. We've also had Urban Land Institute programs, sponsored projects. We had the CityCenter Technical Advisory Panel that brought in real estate experts from across the country to make recommendations for going forward with the redevelopment of the city center area. And we also had the South Broadway Healthy Corridors project, which also brought in experts from around the country to make recommendations of how we can improve the Broadway corridor from Yale to Oxford. And the Planning and Zoning Commission was very busy as well. They did a use interpretation on a proposed food market at 900 East Hampton Avenue. Did some review of residential dimensional standards on council's request. Worked on short-term rentals and accessory dwelling units. They reviewed the Englewood Forward Indicator Strategy and Work Program. Did a conditional use on an amusement establishment at 4011 South Broadway. Reviewed the multi-year capital plan. Handled and reviewed 2 PUDs, one being the Pearl Street PUD, which was not recommended, as well as the Synergy Medical Office PUD, which was recommended to council. They also reviewed the ULI Healthy Corridors, made some amendments to their bylaws, reviewed an urban lot at 4210 South Delaware Street, did some miscellaneous reviews on different fixes to the development code, and reviewed the long-range planning update. All right, so those are the city accomplishments for the last 2 years since we have approved the comprehensive plan. So now I just want to briefly kind of go through what the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended as the work program that would be going forward in the next few years, starting with the art, signage, and wayfinding program. This is a very low-hanging fruit type of improvement that we can do fairly quickly. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It would make improvements to our signage throughout the city center, downtown Englewood, and the medical district area. You may be familiar with some of these examples. They're in Littleton, they're below. It kind of directs people to where to go. It's very attractive. So that's something that could be done pretty quickly and easily for a low price point. And since you've had an hour of Downtown Development Authority, I don't think I will go into that. Also, we have for the light rail corridor, so we've been busy working on that. First with the stationary master plan, kind of a vision document. Then we followed that up with the next step study, looking at the infrastructure, looking how it might be realistically engineered. So this picture there is the alignment of the rail trail at Oxford Avenue. That's a very key project that I'm aware that our Public Works Department is trying to get that put into the Dr. Cog Transportation Improvement Program so we can get that funded and built. Going forward, a logical next step would be to do a small area plan for the area where community development staff would organize this process. It would be a process bringing in the landowners and business owners to talk about the zoning regulations and what we might like to see going forward. The idea might be to develop a transit overlay zoning district. This would go on top of the existing industrial zone district, and then landowners would have 2 choices. They could either develop under the industrial regulations as an industrial use, or they could redevelop it as a more transit-oriented development style development that would be that they would follow a transit overlay district regulations instead. Citywide Housing Needs Assessment and Action Plan. The city will continue to be challenged in regards to its housing stock in the future due to the aging of the baby boom generation and the coming age of millennials, the largest in American history. There will be a shortage of senior housing, assisted living, and nursing homes. 1950 single-family homes will continue to age. They're soon to pass the 70-year mark, and 1920 single-family homes are going to be nearing the 100-year mark soon. Demand from the large millennial generation will continue to push up prices as long as employment remains high. And the high cost of housing will produce challenges to upgrade, expand, or renovate aging housing. Unfortunately, the city's housing programs are currently on life support at this time. This is due to a number of factors. One of the factors is that the housing specialists that community development had on staff, they retired and they were not replaced. And one of the reasons for that was that the city was unable to get a new line of credit from financial institutions that are necessary to make those loans. Also, at the same time, development block grant funding has over time experienced reductions as well. The city's last two active housing programs are the E-Cubed program, and then there's this emergency handyman grant program that's not advertised. It's only supposed to it's only available in a very acute emergencies where some main system breaks down and they need immediate replacement. So in addition to trying to get some consultants in here to look at the ways that we can reboot those city housing programs, some other things that the Housing Needs Assessment Action Plan can also look at would be single-family ownership, housing stock condition, housing market demand, zoning regulations, missing middle housing types, affordable and workforce housing, motels, code enforcement, property maintenance, and neighborhood improvements. All right, this is a new recommended program that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended last month. This is the medical district transition area in the 3,300 blocks of Logan, Pennsylvania, and Pearl Street. As you recall, there was a proposal for a PUD to do townhomes on Pearl Street for, I believe, 3 different properties that are adjacent to each other. The Planning and Zoning Commission felt that that was maybe not the right way to go about it, and felt that we should maybe look at a little bit larger of an area that would make more sense to transition over to the ability to do townhomes. And so the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends doing a small area plan process that we have traditionally done in the medical district to bring property owners together to ask them whether they think this would be a good idea to allow townhomes in that area and what the boundaries of that area might look like. What are their next steps? We want to do an indicator data update. We weren't
You
able
may
to
have
do-
flipped. Did you skip a in between one?
I flipped these slides.
Oh, okay. You flipped them. Okay.
I made that decision this afternoon. I think this will work better. So indicator data update, we want to do that in the first quarter of 2019 as soon as we can get that new American Community Survey data. Then we'll work with the Planning and Zoning Commission to do a reevaluation of the selected strategies and work program based on that new indicator data. Then they would go ahead and develop a Planning and Zoning Commission recommended work program, which would be presented to Council for 2019. And then we would hope to get Council consensus to move forward with some of these individual work items. All right, so the planning. So moving into this, let's look at attachment A. So attachment A is our first indicator report that we did in 2017. So the comprehensive plan calls for an annual indicators update, but they also call for every 5 years a more extensive update, which includes all of these different indicators in addition to the ones you have in front of you in attachment A. So at this time, I think I'm just going to ask whether Council would like to add any of these indicators into our annual indicator update for the first quarter of 2019. And also, I can also take any other questions that Council would have on comprehensive planning and long-range planning.
Point of information, Mayor. Just so I understand correctly, this is attachment A, what we're looking at on the screen.
No.
I'm not sure. You guys?
I don't know that we received.
It's a really big spreadsheet, I think that.
Oh, that's a spreadsheet. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Does that make sense?
I've got it.
Councilmember Wink, did you have a question too? Were you answering the question maybe?
I was answering the question. I would most definitely want to see water usage as an indicator. I think it has far-reaching repercussions for success of our city, and I want to see what that looks like at residential, commercial, at whatever level makes sense to give us those initial figures. Does that make sense?
Can you be a little more specific of what you'd like to see?
Water usage?
Water usage? Okay.
Sorry.
I did miss that.
Thank you, John.
You.
Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. I would also like to see water usage on there, and I would also like to see the Englewood trolley, bus transit service and boardings, and light rail boardings. And I think cost of living, if we could have that too.
In the earlier presentation, I asked for home comparisons, so I don't know.
Yes, I did.
Did you
write that down.
Okay.
Like to see market housing prices comparing Englewood to neighboring suburbs.
Yeah, and I don't know if we can break it down in terms of sort of segments of Englewood even to get some sense of which neighborhoods are higher, lower, or just, I'm more interested in figuring out where can we find affordable housing for first-time buyers, particularly. Because I just keep hearing that even, first-time buyers can't afford to get into Englewood. And they might have a 900 square foot home and it goes for $350,000, which just seems absolutely insane to me.
Understood.
Any other indicators that anyone has or questions? It's a pretty good list. Okay.
Also, in your opening, you mentioned something about that Mr. Cuesta had some ideas. Would Mr. Cuesta like to share those with me?
Thank you, and I appreciate bringing that up, Mayor. Thank you, sir. At this point in time, I think I'm not quite there yet, and I've been speaking with, several different folks throughout the neighborhood that brought it to my attention, and I'd like a bit more information before I present it to everyone. I am happy to hear that we're kind of on the front end of this conversation. We'll be revisiting the comp plan and doing some more work on it. So I will pass this evening. I certainly echo Mayor Olson's request for some more data on affordable housing. In the early presentation, it was mentioned that Englewood is considered to have a relatively healthy stock of affordable housing. I think that's by comparison to other municipalities in the metro area. I hear a lot of folks where that's not the case for them and their relatives, be it their children coming out of college, or even some folks that are working day to day, that they're just unable to find that. So I would appreciate some more data on that as well. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
I have one question. I think it's right here. The medical district transition area, redoing some areas in the 3300 block of Logan, Pennsylvania, and Pearl Street in bigger areas. In view of what has been presented this evening earlier in the redevelopment plan, it seems really like a waste of time to go ahead and do these blocks because they're in that medical district. And so I'm thinking that might not be necessary.
Is there a council consensus on that?
Can you explain a little bit more what you mean? I think I'm confused by your map in some degrees because it looks like it's further north than I thought in terms, if you're saying that south of Floyd is a residential transition area or area of stability, whereas that's some of the area where people are complaining that it's not, but is that redevelopment by opportunity?
No, but what my question was on the map that they showed on the corridor from, and I don't think it would have been in your presentation. It was in the previous presentation for the redevelopment plan from the medical district down to city center. That picture is those two blocks, the 33, and actually it's the 3400 south to Hampton, correct?
This recommendation is for the 3300 block of Pennsylvania, Pearl, and Logan. So it's a little bit north of what the area that you're referring to is, and a little east.
3300 block is, okay, that's Floyd. Floyd north.
Floyd to Girard.
Oh, it's south. It says number 2 on here. Is that what it is? If you go to slide 4, maybe. Yeah, that was it.
It was in Dan's presentation?
Yes.
That's number 4 on the bottom of the slide.
It's
but it's
right there,
yeah.
back one.
Oh,
So the yellow area.
Actually, a little bit to the east of that, just above the...
Okay,
the red.
right, it's east of that, but it's in the yellow area, correct? Rezoning it in small pieces may not be necessary if that, I mean, if the plan is being moved forward, I think that...
I think there are two different plans. So the plan that Dan is talking about is for to develop a downtown development authority. More than likely, it would not affect these residential areas. And I think this is a different idea. This is like there's some pressure there where some residents wanted to redevelop townhomes, and the Planning and Zoning Commission thought that should be explored.
With all due respect, I specifically asked him about the residential properties east of Broadway. And he said, yes, those people are in transition. That's all I'm suggesting.
It might be helpful at some point to get an overlay of those two to say, okay, what of these blocks are we talking about? Because I think this little area here is where we hear very mixed, or at least I do, very mixed.
Yes, I do
reports.
too.
Some people want to be able to sell or do something really different, and others are so mad when someone comes in, and some of the development, when you go back to that very first page of Mr.
Yes.
Poremba's, I loved it, uncoordinated market-driven redevelopment, and that's going on all over the place. And that's where I think people are upset, is there's no coordination on our part, and the market
Yes,
is driving whatever.
yes.
Some people think that's okay.
We understand that, and that's why it's very important to have a public process so that people can be heard, and hopefully we can figure out something that makes the most people happy.
Mayor Pro Tem, was
I'm
there
finished.
more with that? Okay.
No, there's nothing else.
All right.
Thank you.
Member Martinez?
Thank you for putting all this together. It's a really nice reminder to be reminded of the things that we've accomplished over the 2 years as it relates to our goals. So thank you for doing that. I'm sure it was no small task to put all this together. And so I have two questions. One is, are we going to relate the things that we've accomplished back to our original comprehensive plan document, like specific to the goals and objectives, or are we going to just be reviewing it in a list form, which I'm totally fine either way?
We could probably do that. I will write that down, and we will for the 2000 when we do the 2019 indicators, we can also represent these accomplishments, and I can list which goals and objectives of the comp plan that they are taken care of.
That would be helpful, because I think it might help give us an idea of what, if anything, that we're missing or need to kind of address that we haven't, because a lot of these we have addressed, but it would be nice to tie them together.
Okay.
So thank you for that. And then, do we have an estimated timeline or anything on the art signage and wayfinding program? Or are we going to talk about that again, or what's the kind of process for that?
Well, I think we'll really have the conversation. We really want to have the big conversation of making a decision here in the first quarter of 2019. And so that's when I think we will revisit that, and we would like to probably move forward in 2019 with that program.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Cuesta.
There was one thing that caught my eye in the presentation as you went through, and it was on slide 21, and it related to the housing specialist retirements. We did not replace, it sounds like, the person filling that position, but it also mentioned that we were unable to get a new line of credit from financial institutions. And I'm sure we could have a conversation about the housing specialist program, but why were we unable to get any new lines of credit? Was there any particular reason that we weren't getting denied? It says institutions, meaning it sounds like we were denied by more than one.
I believe they tried with 2 or 3 banks, and there used to be, from what I was been told by Harold Stitt, who's since retired, is that there used to be a financial and tax incentive to offer this service to a nonprofit organization such as the city. However, that incentive kind of went away, and banks aren't really, it's just such a small account that they're just not, it doesn't make them much money, and it's just not something that is, they have found to be worthwhile and don't want to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Berentine.
I just want to, the way the presentation is, it's kind of like we were going to go through with something like the wayfinding signs, but that was turned down by council not to do that. I think if the council would like to have another discussion about it, but the way the presentation came through is kind of like we were considering that, and that's the next step. Council made a decision not to do that based off of concerns from the businesses. They didn't want it in front of their business, taking up their sidewalk and potentially other uses that they could do, as we've seen some people put patios in. The other, Littleton is a good example. They have on some corners several competitive wayfinding signs. One is an historic one, and the other one is the Hollywood sign that they put up. And been to some community events there where there's some a lot of complaints about that. It just takes up space, especially when they've got the blind school down there. But when we had the community meetings, that was actually one of the lowest rated amenities that was being proposed at the time, mostly because people thought it's pretty foolish, even if it's the original block, and then for 3 blocks, if people can't figure out where they're at for 3 blocks. And then how would we put businesses on there? Who would go on? Who gets to pay? How would we work all of that out? So I really, if council wants to bring that back again, then I really would like to have the discussion again, but we have to remember it was never approved to move forward. In the first place, council made the decision not to. I want to have the discussion again. That's awesome, but we just have to keep in mind that we did a lot of research and a lot of community outreach on that, and that was really one of the, it wasn't low-hanging fruit. People thought it was foolish and a waste of money. There was some, I think, a grant or something that was available at the time to at least do that block, but then to go ahead and do any additional ones. So I don't want to lose our history of discussion or make it seem as if we were just automatically going to move forward with that. But if council's interested in doing it again, then we can bring it forward.
I think there was a question embedded in that about whether or not you all saw it.
We had a lot of history on it.
Point of order. Can we have one conversation at a time, please?
Yeah, I would like to hear the answer, and because I think you're raising a good question.
I would prefer not to have it. I think her
ask a question.
I think her redoing of my question might have been a little off. So if I didn't make it clear, I apologize for that. I would like to have my question is, could we have the history of that? The second is, in the presentation, it appears as if it might be something that was already approved, and I think it was referenced as the next step moving forward, so that we could get a little bit better history of where we were at with that piece of it, because I think it kind of looks in the presentation as if it was approved by council and was moving forward. And then if we could also make sure that if it comes forward, that we get all of the work, energy, and effort and community outreach that we did before brought forward again, so that we're just not reinventing the wheel every year.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I just wanted to clarify a little bit of the nomenclature of how the presentation was brought together. We weren't interpreting that step in terms of wayfinding and the signage as an approved council thing that we would be implementing in 2019. That was among the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended projects. And so I think it's legitimate to ask, where does that fall in the overall construct of the priorities? One thing that I would suggest, relating back to Dan's presentation earlier in the evening, that something like that is tailor-made for the organization he talked about that may be in our future, like a downtown business improvement district or development authority. Those types of entities really take on those types of wayfinding and signage projects and make them their own. And maybe that's the place where that ultimately lands. But I wanted to clarify that we didn't interpret that as a done deal. It was a recommended of the list of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Russell?
Actually, I don't know that I have a question for Mr. Voberl. Are we going to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about this after his presentation amongst ourselves?
Yes, so I thought that what we were going to do tonight was, you've given us your updates, but we were going to give direction to him on how we want to have the next conversation. What is a priority? What kinds of things? How do we want to step out? And that's why I brought up Member Cuesta's thing, because I think at the time when we brought this up was you had some hot spots, and we thought, oh, let's start with those first, rather than, start with at the top, but we can start at the top of the plan and work down. That was my understanding is what tonight was for. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you were expecting tonight, Mr. Voberl, but.
Well, quite frankly, we were given this topic comprehensive plan, and we heard a little bit that there was some desire to tell us about some additional indicators that you would like to see moving forward, and that's about the extent of what we knew about it.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
Okay, so, and that goes back to what my understanding of this was, to reevaluate some of the items in the comprehensive plan altogether, because I don't believe that we have the financial resources to implement everything in here, and so I thought we might look at some of those issues.
Could I ask for our acting deputy city manager to tell us what you thought we were doing tonight? Because I heard just slightly different in what you thought was the direction.
Our hope was to provide an overview, but also to say, here is a method that we could evaluate how we're progressing. It wasn't to go back and decide what the priorities necessarily were, but what information council wanted in what format, so that you could see where we're going and if you wanted to move forward with that. So indicators is one way of doing that. If you would like a different way of measuring progress, or saying what's been accomplished, it's definitely time for you to chime in and offer some guidance in terms of that formatting. I think that would be very helpful.
If you have any ideas, please give them to us.
I also thought that one of the things is if we think we're going in the wrong direction, so that we can say, you know what, the market isn't right, or we've heard enough from the community that no, this kind of thing. And that's where I thought Member Cuesta's had some hot spots that he was still questioning, and it's fine if you're not prepared to do that tonight, but I want to make sure we had opportunity to do that. Member Cuesta.
You bet. And mine will be relative, and I'm certainly not trying to be quiet. I just want to make sure I have everything in front of me.
Oh, it's fine.
And it does have to do with redevelopment in residential areas, and it's one that I know everybody's probably heard about on both sides. And so it's that exact language I want to make sure that I have in place before getting with the group. But I also think that if this is the venue, I certainly don't mind revisiting what we think might be financially feasible or infeasible at this point. My understanding is we would have this review annually, and that really it's kind of it's an open forum where anybody could address any subjects that they thought were relevant to the comp plan. So I would be happy to engage in any financial subjects that might be related if that's where the conversation goes. Now, if that wasn't what we're going to do tonight, and that's in further study sessions, certainly okay as well. But I'm happy to discuss any component of the comprehensive plan. I think it's a good exercise too for us to do that.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mayor.
That's helpful. Thank you, Councilmember Berentine.
I appreciate always having conversations about all of the stuff that we're doing, but the comprehensive plan is a land use, and it has a process. I'm not sure that we could just, we can discuss things that we like about it or don't, but I guess I'll ask the city attorney if, isn't there a process that we need to follow in order to make any changes to the comprehensive plan? And I understand that the reason that that's the process is somewhat onerous and involved and involves the community, and public hearings is my understanding because it affects people's property. So I like the kind of feel the intent that there's some living, breathing document to this, but it is a rather onerous and involved process, I believe, to change anything.
It is. I don't think there's anything to add. You explained that beautifully. It's a very detailed process. It is not something we can do in one meeting. It would probably take you several months of going back and reviewing. So if the conversation tonight is just to talk, as I understood it, was just to talk about where this plan is now and whether or not council feels like it's being met or not. And if council feels that it is not being met, to direct staff to start looking at specific sections and bring that back, and you can update parts of it without updating the whole thing. But as it was presented to me when I reviewed the agenda, this is just a touching base to make sure the comprehensive plan is being carried out in the way council.
Yeah, I appreciate the interim deputy city manager update on what she believed we were doing today, to just do an update on it. Thank you.
I would love to see us pick up on what Councilmember Martinez said in terms of following the strategic plan goals so that we do connect this with those. I think that is a more connected way to evaluate. If we're evaluating whether we're reaching our goals, I'd like to see what the goal is that these different segments would fit under. And I think that would help maybe you to know if we haven't met one, we know what the challenge is for meeting that particular one, and it might be financial because we can't afford that yet, and this is supposed to be a living document without a timeline to say by next year we have to get this particular thing done, right? We set our own timelines, but we have this general framework we're working under, so we may not change the actual framework, but we may change some of the specific goals as we go. Is that your correct reading on it?
Sure. Council's goals can change often from one council to another, and so obviously you can't implement this whole plan overnight, and you're going to have to prioritize what you want to see go forward. So yes, we would love that.
Okay. So that would help me if we followed that. Anybody else want to give some more feedback to him? All right. Looks like everybody's got their answers so far. But I appreciate you doing this, and I would like to see us do it fairly regularly, getting more updates along the way and being able to give you some feedback on those.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We will do that.
Thank you. We're now at item number 5, which is council members' choice. Who would like to start with us? Start this. Councilmember Wink.
No report.
Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. 2 things. I just want to say I liked our first agenda item, how the format of that. We each asked 2 questions and then went around again. I think that was really productive. And want to thank all the families and congratulate the students who participated in the student art calendar event this week. It was a really great turnout. The community room was packed and the kids were so excited. So thank you to everyone who participated in that, and congratulations again to the students.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Barentine.
I wanted to go back to the budget just a little bit on some of the issues that got brought up. And I really, there was a community meeting, and one of the members brought up, and I believe in reference to what Councilmember Sierra had brought up, I looked at it differently after that conversation. And I love having these coffees and community meetings because everybody brings a little bit something different to the table. It's good to have conversation and discussion about it. And the way that they were looking at what the comment that Councilmember Sierra made was the numbers we have in front of us, what would we do? And I think that we ought to, in reference to that, my response was, in looking at that I was trying to address some of the where the numbers were coming from, whether they were accurate, whether they could be backed up and documented. And they saw that comment more like, okay, what do we do with what we have right now? And I believe you might have brought up a really good point. We should be looking at, I'll back up just 1 second. While I do believe that there are some concerns over the revenue numbers and whether they are, can be substantiated to go ahead and do the end result of what we're anticipating with this budget or not, you know, it's a guessing game, you see, but some of the revenue numbers that I've looked at, I'm not as confident with. But to your point about what do we do with the numbers that we have now, and especially addressing the capital, the infrastructure issues that we're dealing with, is maybe we should have some conversation about at least a percentage piece of what we would decrease so that we could go ahead and ensure that we had more money going to infrastructure and to resolve some of the issues that we're dealing with. So I do, I hope you appreciate, Councilmember Sierra, that I was trying to address that piece of it, but later putting some more thought into your conversation, I do agree that maybe we should deal with the numbers that we have now and maybe look at a 2.5% decrease, committing that money to those funds specifically, not hoping that we have money at the end of the year. We have sinkholes and things happen, and the best plan, unless we can specifically find or come to some agreement that some of the numbers are under or overstated. But I think we should look at specifically taking a specific cut and across the board to try and address the infrastructure issues that we have instead of just hoping that we have some overages. I hope that in looking back over the months of budget conversations that we had, we did have presentations, but none of them were attached with numbers. I have presentation after presentation, and I really hope that when we go forward that we change that over a little bit more. So I appreciate that. The other issue that I would like to bring up is that I did ask for information on how the CAM charges were done, and I was told that they were done through journal entries. I have the detailed general ledger report that was provided. However, I only have one side of the entry. I don't have the other side of the account. At this time, as an example with this, and my concern with this Englewood Environmental Foundation and the budgeting for these CAM charges, we're currently charging in 2019 $360,000, and to date we're only at $188,000. So what I asked for was what was backing up those numbers to go ahead and budget that kind of excessive amount. Tonight we found out that there was money now that we're making on that. I assume that might be the 7% in the contract. I don't know, and I don't know how they're investing it because or how we're getting paid back for the salaries. That still isn't clear yet. But I think we need to take a little bit better look at the Public Works Department, where this is setting, and how we're accounting for that, because the information that I've asked for doesn't justify the $360,000. So those are the two issues on the budget. And that was all that I had.
Thank you. Councilmember Sierra.
So yeah, so we're still on member's choice, correct?
Councilmember Choice.
Okay. So I wanted to bring up during our last council meeting, I noticed that we just didn't have added security as we've had in previous, going back to what, August or so, something along those lines. So I guess I just was curious about why the drop-off in security. I know that initially it was because of a potential threat. We didn't get much details on that, at least personally I didn't get much details on this, but I'm just curious, was there a reason for dropping off the added security during council meetings specifically? I wasn't talking about study session, but council meetings. And, I know that some other councils have instituted added security, at least metal detectors during some council meetings, but is that true for any other areas within the metro area? Should we have added security, I guess is the question.
I think that's still being evaluated. The reason that it was dropped off last week, there was no additional information on any potential threats or anything along those lines. The additional security it's not budgeted, so we've been drawing from our patrol staffing, our impact team, or other areas to supplement that. But that would be something that we could certainly discuss with the chief of police moving forward.
Okay, so I just want to have that discussion at some point about whether or not we do need added security, not necessarily for our safety, but also for the public safety when they decide to come to council meetings. But I'm open either way, just depending on what type of feedback we get from the police and anybody else that's interested in providing that information. So that's it.
Thank you. Anything else?
That is it. Thank you.
Anyone else tonight? Oh, Councilmember Cuesta, sorry, I pushed you right off.
You bet. And I know we're going to return to the budget at our next council meeting, so I won't dwell on that for too long. But I certainly appreciate the thoughts here by Councilmember Barentine. And you made a comment to me last week that stuck as well, Councilmember Sierra, and that was staff given that particular directive? Did we set the expectation from the get-go that we're looking for all budgets stay flat? We cut 1%, 2%, whatever number we reach. And I think that setting something from the outset would be really helpful for staff as well as us, so that we know what the expectations are. And I've received a lot of emails, comments from constituents on both sides of the budget, and so I'm sure everybody else says here too. So I've got some more thoughts for our next meeting. The sands are running through the hourglass at this point on this 2019 budget. There's only so much we can do, but I am seeing a lot I think we can do for next year to really set those expectations further in advance. And so credit to you. You really planted a seed with me on that. The second one was regarding exit interviews with staff, and this was requested, this was maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and I know that it was undetermined if those were allowed to be released. I know that possibly there could have been some redacting, and then they could be viewed by council. Was there a decision made on that? I didn't see any information provided in the council members' request, and it's possible I overlooked it, but I was wondering if you could shed any further light on that.
Yes, I met with the HR director a couple of weeks ago, and we went over the elements of that could be released without violating any kind of HR issues, because anything we release on this has to be something that can be released to the public at large. And anyway, that was set up, and I need the HR director to speak further.
So I would suggest that, unless it's really quick, I guess we could, yeah. Can you get it? I know that the public has already told us they're not hearing this at home, so I just put it right up to your mouth.
Yeah, don't worry, my boys, they can hear it, so. Whoever is here can hear me, so don't worry. We are working on researching, as the city manager, the city attorney says, we discuss what we can release, and we're working on a report to provide you with the comments from the exits interview. We cannot provide you the actual document. We can provide you the comments without identifying who they were from, and we're working on going back 2 years. I mean, we need to go into the filing room, pull them out, type them. So we're working on a report back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. And I'm sorry, how many years did you say that you're going back on those?
2 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? All right, I have a few things. So the homelessness forum that the county did on open space parks, I am going to hand out a handout, and maybe we can have someone scan this too. But one of the things that I've been hearing about that the county does and it developed, and it's just in its infancy stage. So if you go on to this, the ARAPA source, it's www.arapasource.org, and the county is putting together any kind of agencies around a set of types of resources. So everything from aging services down to vision assistance. There's a whole long laundry list of things on here. And what they're trying to do is, did you get one?
Yes, I do.
Can you make sure the clerk gets
Did we
one?
not go that way?
Yeah. Pardon?
We didn't go that way?
We did. Just want to make sure she gets one so they can scan it. But it was a very helpful tool to look at and see where things are. You can put it's like a GPS. You put in where you live, and then you look around. And it's really meant for the providers who are helping someone who might be experiencing stress in their housing or related to finances and out-and-out homelessness. So what I've done is I've been giving this to a number of organizations in Englewood that I know, and including Tony Arnaldi, to make sure that the organizations that are serving in our area are on this site so that people can see it. And it should be a really robust tool, I would think, within the next 6 to 8 months. There were several of us from Englewood. There was nice to see Dave Lee, and then Reed and Brath was there too, and I don't know if anyone else came later or not, but they mostly talked about open parks, and park rangers from Boulder were there, and a number of ideas that they've been instituting, including a database for transients that they share across jurisdictions to help make sure that they find someone in one park and they might appear in another, which they have lots of parks and open space in Boulder, that they can try to group their resources to make sure that people are getting what they need. The second thing is Opera Colorado. Some of you may have checked your email before you came, but they are giving us a discount on the opening of La Traviata, which is very cool. It's expensive, but it's a very nice gesture. They are so excited about their practice rehearsal center, that's here in Englewood over by the Oxford Station. And so they wanted to give us something in gratitude for being here. They're enjoying it. Then you may have heard that Ms. Colorado Senior America has won the National Ms. Senior America and she's from Englewood. So Gail Novak is the winner of the National Ms. Senior America Award, and they're all excited. So we're trying to find ways to bring her in. So if you're doing a community meeting and you want her to come and show up, that's something you could definitely do. I think we'll try and find a way to have her come to a meeting at some point when we're not too full on a regular night, and have her be introduced and maybe just do a quick invite to the microphone and honor her. The last thing I wanted to say is I am just thrilled at where our budget currently is, and that isn't just anybody's particular to thank, except that, wow, to be close to $5 million in the black at this point. I know that we're not done with the year. Lots of things can happen. Let's hope we don't have major snowstorms that eat it all up in plowing in the next few months. But I'm just looking over the history of the last 5 to 8 years. I just remember having to do all kinds of things that were really difficult, and trying to put people on furlough and not fill positions to try and keep everything at bay. So it's definitely, we're in a much better place than we've been in the past. So Mayor's choice is over. Member Pro Tem, that's fine. Go ahead.
I actually pushed it about the time you started to speak, so
no worry.
I apologize. I just wanted to, I had a coffee last week right after the budget, and there was a lot of good input, and I also want to thank you for your comment and just, trying to think outside of the box. But when you get a group of citizens together, they can brainstorm, and they had some really good ideas, and I think for moving forward, but I also think along the same lines as Councilmember Barentine said, setting a percentage of the budget that we would cut across the board even this year and set that aside to specifically deal, especially with the storm sewer drains. They had amazing ideas, and so I'm thinking about that over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll be able to have a motion, and it'll be I think it'll be an amazing thing. So I just want to thank the citizens for their input and for their creativity and thinking outside of the box. So thank you very much.
On to city managers, deputies, acting deputy city manager.
Whoever I am. No, no report tonight. Thank you.
All right. And city attorney's choice?
No report.
All right. So the study session is adjourned. However, we need to come back into a special